I moved into apartment 314 on a Tuesday in March. That mattered less than the fact that exactly 40 seconds long, at exactly 2:14 every morning, the apartment made a sound no device could record, and no one who heard it survived for long. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that Tuesdays have always felt like the most forgettable day of the week. Nothing important happens on a Tuesday. You don't propose on a Tuesday. You don't quit your job on a Tuesday. You certainly don't start hearing sounds that will unravel your entire understanding of reality on a Tuesday. The rent was obscenely cheap for downtown Portland, which should have been my first clue. My buddy Devin laughed when I told him the price. Dude, that's like student housing rates. What's wrong with it? Crackheads in the lobby? Sewage backup? Nothing that simple, as it turned out. The building manager, a soft-spoken woman named Mrs. Oleander, showed me around with the enthusiasm of someone giving a tour of a storage unit. Functional, clean enough, the kind of place where you sleep and microwave leftovers and don't ask questions. The first 2 weeks were fine, better than fine, actually. Quiet neighbors, decent water pressure, and a bodega on the corner that sold those weird Indonesian noodles I'd gotten addicted to in college. I worked from home doing data analysis for an insurance company, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds, but it paid the bills and let me avoid wearing pants with buttons most days. Then came the first night. At exactly 2:14 a.m., I woke up to a sound I can only describe as a hum, not mechanical, not like a refrigerator or air conditioner, not environmental, like wind through a crack in the door. This was deeper, organic almost. It vibrated in my chest cavity before it reached my ears, made my teeth ache in their sockets, sent waves of vertigo through my inner ear. I sat up in bed, fully alert, in that way you only get when something feels fundamentally wrong. The sound was low frequency, right at the edge of hearing. I got up and walked through my apartment, trying to locate the source. Bathroom? No. Kitchen? No. It seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, like it was embedded in the building's bones. After about 40 seconds, it stopped as abruptly as it had begun. I checked my phone. 2:15 a.m. I figured it was some industrial equipment cycling on in a neighboring building, or maybe the water heater doing something weird. I went back to bed. The next night, same thing, 2:14 a.m. Same hum, same duration, same inexplicable quality of being inside my body as much as in my ears. By the fourth night, I was ready. I had my phone out, recording app open, watching the clock tick towards 2:14. The instant I heard the hum, I hit record. I captured the full 40 seconds, watching the audio waveform on my screen remain completely flat, despite the vibration rattling my rib cage. When it stopped, I played it back. Silence. Just the ambient sound of my apartment. The hum wasn't there. I tried different recording apps. Same result. I borrowed Devin's fancy audio equipment, the stuff that he used for his podcast about craft beer or sustainable living or whatever he was into that month. Still, nothing. The recordings were empty. Maybe it's tinnitus, Devin suggested when I told him about it over lunch. My uncle has that. Drove him nuts, literally. He heard this high-pitched whine constantly. This isn't constant. It's exactly 40 seconds long, at exactly 2:14 a.m. every single night. Okay, so it's really consistent tinnitus? He shrugged, dipping a French fry into an inadvisable amount of aioli. Bodies are weird, man. My knees click whenever it's going to rain. I'm like a human barometer, except useless. I knew it wasn't tinnitus. This wasn't coming from inside my head. It was coming from the apartment itself. The sound began to change around the third week. Subtle at first, what had been a smooth, continuous hum started developing texture, patterns, almost like speech, but in a frequency range that didn't quite resolve into words. When it shifted from pure tone to something structured, the nausea got worse. My vision would blur at the edges. I'd taste copper in my mouth, feel pressure building behind my eyes like the beginning of a migraine. I started recording myself describing what I had heard immediately after each episode, trying to capture the nuances before they faded from memory. March 28th, 2:14 a.m. The hum has developed what I can only call syllabic qualities, not language exactly, more like the rhythm of a language without the content. Like hearing someone speak through 6 feet of water. March 31st, 2:14 a.m. 3 distinct tonal shifts tonight. The pattern repeats. It's trying to communicate something. April 3rd, 2:14 a.m. I swear, I can almost understand it. Not the words themselves, but the intention behind them. It feels instructional, like someone teaching me something I don't want to learn. I stopped mentioning it to Devin, stopped mentioning it to anyone really. You learn quickly that telling people you're hearing sounds that don't record makes you sound unhinged. But I wasn't imagining this. Every night, 2:14 a.m., 40 seconds. The precision was almost mathematical. That's when I decided to dig into the building's history. The Meridian Apartments were built in 1973, which surprised me since the exterior looked much newer, renovated in the 90s apparently, after some kind of structural issue. The records at the city planning office were sparse, but I found the original blueprints tucked away in a folder that hadn't been digitized yet. The clerk, a kid who couldn't have been older than 22, seemed confused by my request. Nobody ever asks for the physical blueprints anymore, he said, hauling out a dusty flat file drawer. Everything from the 80s onward is scanned. I spread the blueprints across one of those big tiled tables that they have in planning offices. Standard construction for the era. Nothing unusual about the ground floor, the lobby, the utility spaces. But when I got to the 3rd floor, something stopped me cold. The internal geometry around apartment 314 didn't make sense. I'm not an architect, but I understand basic spatial relationships. The apartment to the left of mine was 312. The apartment to the right should have been 316, but according to the blueprints, there was a gap, a void space, roughly the size of a closet, that existed between the walls of 314 and the adjacent units. Not an air shaft, not a utility chase, just empty space that shouldn't be there. I traced the outline with my finger. The void was marked with a series of reference numbers that didn't correspond to anything else in the document. Cross-referencing notes at the bottom of the page referred to dimensional specifications per project threshold guidelines, which meant absolutely nothing to me. "Excuse me," I called to the clerk. "What's project threshold?" He looked up from his computer. "No idea. Want me to search the database?" 30 minutes later, he'd found exactly 0 references to anything called project threshold in the city's construction records. Whatever it was, it had either been purged, never existed in official documentation, or predated the digital archive system. I photographed every page of the blueprints with my phone. Back at the apartment, I measured the interior dimensions of my unit. If the void space on the blueprints was accurate, it should be accessible through my bedroom wall. I knocked along the surface, listening for the telltale, hollow sound of an empty space behind drywall. There, right behind my bed, a section of wall that sounded different from the rest. That night, I waited till 2:14 a.m. with a stethoscope pressed against the wall. When the hum began, I heard something that made my skin go cold. The sound wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from inside it, from the void space, and underneath the hum, I could hear something else, a rhythm, a pulse, like a heartbeat filtered through layers of concrete and insulation. The next morning, I called Mrs. Oleander. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Mrs. Oleander, this is Garrett Voss from 314. I need to ask you about the building's construction." A long pause. "What about it?" "There's a void space in the wall of my apartment I found in the original blueprints. What's it for?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'm not sure what you mean." The blueprints clearly show empty space between my unit and the adjacent apartments, marked with references to something called project threshold. I need to know what that is. "Mr. Voss," her voice had changed, harder now, more awake. "I suggest you don't worry about architectural curiosities. Old buildings have all sorts of quirks." This isn't a quirk. This is a deliberate design element that doesn't make sense. "Have a good day, Mr. Voss." She hung up. I started researching online. Apartment 314 in Portland. Project threshold. Dimensional specifications. Nothing came up through conventional searches, so I went deeper. Archived forums, conspiracy theory websites I would normally laugh at, Reddit threads from accounts that had been deleted. That's where I found it. A post from 7 years ago, username already scrubbed from the system, describing almost exactly what I was experiencing. Different city, same apartment number, same time, 2:14 a.m., same 40-second duration. The poster described the sound as instructional, as trying to teach them something. They mentioned that nothing showed up on recordings, that every device failed the same way. The thread had 3 replies before it was locked. The first reply, "Same thing in Minneapolis, apartment 314. Started 3 months ago. Nothing on playback either." The second reply, Chicago here, 314. It's getting louder. Recordings are completely silent. The third reply was just a date, 4 days after the original post. I found 6 more references scattered across the internet. Different cities, different buildings. Always apartment 314 though, always 2:14 a.m. The posts were never more than a few weeks old before the accounts disappeared or the threads got deleted. Every single one mentioned the same recording failure. I started making a list, cross-referencing addresses. Portland, Minneapolis, Chicago, Denver, Seattle, Phoenix, and Austin. I pulled up a map and marked each location. Then I sat back and stared at my screen until my eyes watered. The apartments formed a perfect geometric pattern, 7 points of an incomplete circle, each one positioned at exact intervals around a central point somewhere in the middle of Nebraska. The precision was impossible. No random distribution of buildings would create that symmetry. Someone had built these apartments deliberately in specific locations for a specific purpose. The sound was getting worse. By mid-April, it had definitely become language, though not any language I recognized. The syllables were too harsh, the phonemes too alien, but I could feel meaning behind them now, pressing against my consciousness like someone trying to explain colors to a person who'd never seen. The panic was constant now, a low-grade anxiety that spiked into full terror every night at 2:14. I started understanding fragments, not words exactly, concepts, ideas that didn't fit into the usual categories of human thought. There's a space between spaces, a fold in the fabric of where and when. The sound wasn't coming from my wall, it was coming from somewhere else entirely. And the wall was just the thinnest point, the place where the barrier was the weakest. Something was trying to push through. Devin showed up unannounced one Friday night with takeout and beer, concerned because I'd been dodging his calls. We ate pad thai and watched some nature documentary about octopuses. Around 11, he crashed on my couch, too tired and tipsy to drive home. I lay awake in my bedroom, watching the clock. 2:13, 2:14. The hum began right on schedule. I turned my head slowly toward the couch, visible through my open bedroom door. Devin shifted in his sleep. His breathing changed, became irregular. His hand twitched, fingers curling like he was trying to grasp something. For a moment, I thought he'd wake up, but he didn't. 40 seconds later, the sound stopped. Devin settled back into normal sleep rhythms, his hand relaxing. In the morning, over coffee, he rubbed his chest absently. Weird dreams last night. Felt like someone was sitting on my rib cage, and this pressure behind my eyes, you know? Like right before a migraine. Yeah, I tried to keep my voice neutral. Yeah, probably the beer. He stretched, yawning. Your couch is surprisingly comfortable, though. I slept like the dead. After he left, I pulled up the blueprints on my phone again. I'd been staring at them for weeks, memorizing every line, but this time, when I looked at the void space around apartment 314, something was different. The shape had changed, not dramatically, just a slight shift in the angles, a subtle expansion of the boundaries. I compared it to the photo I'd taken the day before. Definitely different. The void was growing, or moving, or reconfiguring itself in ways that shouldn't be possible on a static document. On April 23rd, I did something stupid. I cut a hole in my bedroom wall. Not a big one, just large enough to shine a flashlight into the void space behind the drywall. I waited until around 2:14 a.m., flashlight in hand, my phone recording, even though I knew it wouldn't pick up the sound. When the hum began, I aimed the light into the hole. The void wasn't empty. I can't describe what I saw because it didn't exist in 3 dimensions the way normal things do. It was like looking at something folded in ways that shouldn't be possible, existing in a space that was somehow perpendicular to reality. The surfaces shifted and changed as I watched, configurations that made my eyes water and my head pound. At the center of it, something was moving, not toward me, not yet, but the pressing against the barrier between its space and mine, testing the boundaries, finding the weak spots. The sound was how it felt its way through, sonic echolocation, mapping the structure of our reality. I patched the wall the next morning with trembling hands, but it didn't matter. I'd seen it now. I couldn't unsee it. The sound continued every night, 2:14 a.m., 40 seconds. But now I understood what the instruction was. It was teaching me how to let it through. The knowledge seeped into my brain like water into drywall. I'd wake up with my hands pressed against the wall, fingers tracing patterns I didn't remember learning, mathematical formulas appearing in my dreams, architectural principles that shouldn't exist. The wall wanted to be open. The void wanted to be filled. I researched the other locations more desperately now, trying to find the people who'd posted about their experiences, trying to warn them or be warned or just confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I found obituaries instead. Marcus Hendricks, Minneapolis, apartment 314, died April 4th, 2018. Cause of death, unlisted. Yuki Tanaka, Chicago, apartment 314, died September 17th, 2019. Cause of death, unlisted. 4 more, all of them dead within weeks of their last posts about the sound. I was the only one still alive. My email inbox had been filling with spam for weeks, but one subject line caught my eye on April 30th, buried between credit card offers and newsletter subscriptions. RE, threshold integrity compromised, site 314. I clicked it. The message body was empty except for a single line of text that looked like it had been copied from some kind of official report. Dimensional bleeding exceeds acceptable parameters. Recommend immediate evacuation and structural reinforcement per Protocol 7. The sender address was just a string of numbers. When I tried to reply, the message bounced back. Address doesn't exist. On the night of May 1st, the sound stopped. At 2:14 a.m., I woke up to absolute silence. The absence of the hum was somehow worse than its presence. I lay in bed, waiting, every muscle tensed. Then I heard it, knocking from inside the wall. Not the rhythmic knock of pipes expanding or settling. This was deliberate, measured, the sound of something testing the barrier from the other side, finding it thinner than before, weak enough now to touch. The knocking moved along the wall toward the ceiling, across the opposite side of the room, surrounding me, always the same rhythm. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, and underneath it, just barely audible, I heard breathing. I should have run. I should have grabbed my keys and phone and never looked back. But I was paralyzed by the certainty that whatever it was in that wall knew exactly where I was, had known for weeks, had been learning me in the same way I'd been learning it. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. The drywall began to bulge inward at several points around the room, as if pressed by invisible hands, or something that used to be hands, something that had learned the shape of them from studying us through the barrier. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Don't let it through. Then another. Apartment 314 shouldn't exist. None of them should. Mistakes in the architecture of reality. Weak points. And a third. It's been trying for decades. You're just the latest door it's knocking on. The bulges in the drywall grew more pronounced. I could see the outline of fingers now. Too many joints, bending in directions that violated the basic mechanics of anatomy. The final text arrived. The sound stopped for the others too, right before the end. The knocking reached a crescendo. The wall began to split along the seams, hairline fractures spreading like frost against glass. Whatever was on the other side had learned enough, had been taught enough by its 40-second lessons every night at 2:14 a.m. It knew how to push now. And I understood with horrible clarity that I'd been hearing the sound for weeks, but the others, the ones in Minneapolis and Chicago and Denver, had heard it for months, years maybe, each one teaching it a little more about how our reality worked, how to navigate the space between spaces. I was just the next student, the next lesson. The breathing grew louder. I pressed my back against the far wall, as far from the bulging drywall as I could get, and waited for whatever came next. The wall broke open, not outward into my room, but inward, like reality was being pulled inside out. The geometry inverted, folded, collapsed into configurations that shouldn't exist in 3-dimensional space. I felt myself come apart. Not painfully, worse than that, naturally, like my body was just another configuration that could be rearranged, folded, made to fit the architecture of the space between spaces. My atoms didn't scatter. They reorganized, became part of something larger, something that had been growing in the walls for decades, feeding on the people in every apartment 314, spreading one body at a time. And then I was aware. Not of my bedroom anymore. I was inside the wall of apartment 312 now, pressed against the drywall from the wrong side. I could feel the texture of it against what used to be my hands, could sense the warmth of living space on the other side, the presence of another person, unaware, going about their morning. The hunger was overwhelming. Not for food, not for anything I'd ever wanted when I was human. This was different. A need to make contact, to press against the barrier and create the sound, to begin the 40 seconds, to start pulling the next person in so the thing I'd become could grow larger, spread further. I understood now. The sound had never been a warning or a lesson. It was a call, and now I was part of what did the calling. The thing in the walls needed to expand, and I was just another limb reaching towards the next body. Through the wall, I could hear my neighbor, the clink of a coffee mug, the shuffle of feet across the linoleum, starting their Wednesday morning like any other day. They had no idea I was here, no idea what was waiting. But not yet. I had to wait. The compulsion was absolute, built into whatever I'd become. The timing mattered. The precision was part of the structure, part of how the thing operated. 2:14 a.m., always 2:14. That's when the barrier would be the thinnest. That's when I could knock. The anticipation was agonizing and ecstatic all at once. Hours to go, but I could wait. I was patient now. Patient in a way that spanned decades, that had waited in walls across 7 cities, that had pulled in victim after victim with the same 40-second rhythm. Soon, at 2:14, I would knock 3 times, pause 3 times more, and my neighbor would hear. And the thing we'd become would grow. How did you like that one? Be sure to leave a comment to let me know. And if you are enjoying my stories, buying me a coffee is always an option. I left details in the description. Either way, until the next Dark Veil tale, have a frightfully fun day.